Welcome again to Muslim Apologetics Australia. We'll be refuting the apostate prophet on his new video called The Hateful World of Islam. Let's get into it now.
Hi everyone and welcome. This is the Apostate Prophet. Hope you're all doing well. I want to talk about hate. Growing up in a Muslim family, I learned to hate at a very early age. I can't even clearly remember when I learned that Christians were immoral idolaters and pigs while living in Germany, and Jews were always the worst. They were treacherous, evil, unreliable, the greatest enemies of Muslims, the end-time enemy. They hate us. That's a pretty tough thing to adopt, to learn when you are less than 10 years old. But I'm not the only one. It's not even fully about indoctrination directed at children. I didn't have weird faces in a dark room around me tell me things like, Christians are immoral idolaters, and they look like pigs. And then I went out and saw all Christians with pig faces. It's a simple result of growing up with Islam in a religious environment. It's a result of hearing your parents, hearing the local imam, going to Islamic gatherings that you can't possibly describe enough with the word boring. And eventually...
Okay, let's just pause it there. We need to make a clear point of hypocrisy here. He says that growing up, he learned that his parents taught him that non-Muslims or Christians or Jews were people of deceit and, they like to lie. But it's interesting because every time I go to these apologetic pages, whether it's from the atheist movement or from the Christian movement, they're always trying to tell everyone how it is the Muslims who make taqiyya, who actually lie to you. So where is the consistency here? You're here telling me that you grew up to believe that Christians or Jews are people who lie, who are deceitful, but then you're part of the same atheistic or Christian movements out there propagating against Islam, and you're telling other non-Muslims, be it Christians or Jews, that Islam actually encourages its followers to actually lie to non-Muslims. And just before you folks go, oh, well, yeah, it is true because there are places in Islam where you can actually lie, but this is falsified. There are certain types of taqiyya, and taqiyya doesn't give you legitimacy. Just go outside and just lie to a kafir, lie to a non-Muslim. No, there are special circumstances and conditions where a person can lie in Islam. It is when your life is threatened, obviously, just as Christians and Jews also believe that. If Nazi officers came through your house, knocked on the door and asked whether you're hibernating and hiding any Jews inside your house, obviously you have the permissibility to lie in this circumstance in order to save that life. So there are strict rules and regulations in Islam. You can't just go out and lie. But this is the double standards. The double standards is this. He tells us that he grew up believing that his parents told him that Jews and Christians cannot be trusted, they're liars, while at the same time he goes out and propagates how Islam teaches Muslims to actually lie to the kuffar. So to me that doesn't make sense. So on one hand you're accusing the Muslims for indoctrinating you to look at Jews and Christians as liars, when you are pointing the finger at Muslims and saying that it is their religion that teaches them to lie, and therefore the kuffar or the non-Muslims and the atheists must fear these Muslims. So as you point a finger at Muslims and you blame Muslim parents for indoctrinating their children and believe that the kuffar can't be trusted. At the same time, you're indoctrinating the kuffar and the non-Muslims, and you're telling them that the Muslims cannot be trusted. Mate, you really need to give up on apologetics, buddy. By the way, folks, I'm getting to know him. I think he was Turkish himself. He's gone to Germany. He lives in Germany, I believe it is. I think he is a Christian, and now he's propagating against Islam. But look, none of the things that he brings up is anything new. Answering Islam, that web page, 15 to 20 years ago, has written all this information, and it's been refuted. So that's all I'm doing. All I'm doing is readdressing the points. And this is why it's really getting boring by these ex-Muslims and these Christian critics against Islam, or these atheist critics. I mean, they never bring anything new to the table. It's the same thing over and over and over. But that's fine. We'll just go through it. And again, because he's got a few thousand followers, again, we'll go through his videos and refute his points. But that's our duty in Islam, to constantly preserve the truth of Islam. And by the way, folks, I'm Turkish myself too. I was born and raised in the West, in the secular West. I used to be a secularist up until the age of 21, until I converted to Islam. So, you know, it's interesting because we both come from a Turkish background. Here he is trying to criticize Islam. Well, here I am from a secular background, now became a Muslim at the age of 21, 22, and now I'm criticizing his lies against Islam. Ironic, isn't it? But of course, if I start bashing secularism, or if I start bashing the West, apparently I'm not credible. But you know, when an ex-Muslim speaks about Islam, he suddenly becomes credible. As if the term ex-Muslim really means something, you know. If your ex-wife divorced you, doesn't matter what she says about you, apparently it's true. Well, because she's an ex-Muslim, it must be true. Because she's my ex-wife, it must be true, right? Well, that's how the argument goes. Because she's my ex-wife, whatever she says about me, it must be true. Let's continue.
Listening to the Quran or reading the Quran with the combination of Quranic teachings, narrations about Muhammad and his companions, Islamic history, and contemporary Muslim opinions on the infidel. It's inevitable to hate non-Muslims, and especially to hate specific groups.
You know, it's really interesting because, you know, they keep saying, you know, these Muslims hate everyone. These Muslims are told to hate all the infidels and all the non-Muslims. But you go to all their comments, you go to all their Facebook pages where they're all criticizing Islam and Muslims in particular, you see the hatred from their mouths. You see how they ridicule Muslims. You see how they make fun of Muslims. And they constantly do this. Do you see love from them? I mean, don't believe me. Just read their comment pages. See how they slander Muslims, the Prophet ﷺ, the way they speak so highly about themselves, and the way they speak so belittling Muslims, as if we're a primitive race. You know, they call us Neanderthals, like we're so backwards in our theology, in the way we think, our thinking processes. This is love when they speak to you in these terms? This is respect when they speak to you in these terms as Muslims?
Muslims are subject to the same or to similar indoctrination, and they still keep that hatred when they are adults. That even comes without ever meeting the people you hate. Growing up in Germany, for example, most Muslims that I met hated Jews or had a pretty bad opinion about Jews.
And what about the Jews in Israel? Have you looked at their opinions about the Palestinian people? I'll put a hyperlink below this video. You can see the indoctrination of Jewish children. You can see that these children grow up to actually hate the Palestinian Arabs. Look at the video if you don't believe me. In the hyperlink section, just click on the link. You'll see hatred taught to little children from ages 5 and up. So when he turns around and says to me, he grew up in a household to hate Jews and Christians, you can't use that subjective opinion or that particular point in contention to prove an overall case. That's a fallacy. I, for example, when I grew up and my family around me were always practicing, I wasn't practicing. They never taught me to hate Jews and Christians and call them pigs and monkeys and so forth. So there is an inconsistency here. If Islam really taught that, then we'd see a consistency, but we don't see that.
Without ever knowing a Jew, or without ever knowing that someone they knew was a Jew. This is a difficult topic to talk about, especially with Muslims. But if you are a Muslim and you are listening,
No, it's not a very difficult topic to talk about, I can assure you.
no matter how much you think and say, oh, there is no hate at all, this guy is lying, you know exactly what I mean. Of course, there are many
That's not true at all. We, as Muslims, we don't sugarcoat everything. We love for the sake of Allah and we hate sin for the sake of Allah. Just as much as you love good and you hate people who commit sins. You hate Muslims who bring in their Islamic values into the West, don't you? You hate Muslims who practice their religion. You hate Sharia law. You hate many things and aspects and rules and regulations in Islam. You hate the fact that Muslims don't accept homosexuality. You dislike and hate the fact that Muslims may practice polygamy. You hate and despise the fact that Muslim women wear the hijab, and you can't see that as tolerable in the Western nation. And please spare me the nonsense when you turn around and say, oh, we don't really have a problem with Muslims, we have a problem with Islam. Really? So why then do you ban Muslim immigration to the West? You don't say we ban Islam, you say we don't want Muslims here, period. Right? You don't say we just don't want Islam, we don't want Muslims, period. So no, you don't just have a problem with Islam, you have a problem with Muslims. Therefore, you hate Islam and you hate Muslims. All you want is atheists and Christians in this country, in particularly the West. And the only way you'll accept a Muslim person if he becomes an ex-Muslim. But of course, it is Islam and Muslims that encourage to hate people of the Christian faith or the Jewish faith or the atheist ideology.
care for Islamic knowledge and requirements at all. They carry the name Muslim as an identity, as a name, and then go out drinking or going out with girlfriends. Even such a Muslim is usually subject to some indoctrination about the infidel, the non-Muslims, the Christians and Jews. But they don't care very much because they care more about their own life and pleasures, which is fine. It naturally bothers them when I talk about this because they don't care and they don't know, and they don't want hate associated with them because they don't really abide by this hate. A Muslim who believes but doesn't strictly follow Islam but is still very proud about his faith in Islam has usually quite negative opinions about the infidel, the non-Muslim, especially the Jew. The Jew always has to be there. But they don't consider this hate because their standards of hate are quite different. They don't call it hate, but after a little bit of insisting, they will go ahead and try to explain why Jews are bad, and why non-Muslims cannot be fully trusted, and why Christians are considered immoral and disobedient and whatever, and why polytheists are bad, and why atheists can't be tolerated, and why apostates are considered evil. They will call it hate, but after a little bit of insisting, they will go ahead and try to explain why Jews are bad, and why non-Muslims cannot be fully trusted.
Now, I need to stop it there for a second. It's interesting because he constantly says why Jews are bad, why Jews are this, why Jews... You know, the Quran outlines, and he'll go through the verses and we'll go through them, right? Now, the Quran outlines that the Jews are actually disobedient towards God. And this is the reason that we may look down upon them. In the same way that Christians may look down upon Muslims for being disobedient, for not accepting Jesus Christ as their Lord and Saviour. Christians and Jews have this sort of discrepancy even between one another. And so if you go to the Jews, they'll say some very nasty things against Jesus Christ. They'll call him a son of a whore. This is regarding Jesus Christ. I'll post a video link below this video, and you can see how Jews, in fact, actually swear at Jesus. They actually say, "We even killed your Messiah," insulting him in the most vicious ways. And so we see this between religious people. I mean, this isn't just an exception for Muslims, but why does the apostate prophet go only after Muslims and criticize them when you see the same thing done from Christian right-wing groups against Muslims? You see the same thing done by Jews against Christian minorities, and you even see communists in China doing persecutions against Christian minorities and even Muslim minorities. But why isn't that talked about by the apostate prophet? Why is it that he only, singles out Islam and Muslims? Because that's what he's paid to do, right? Because anti-Islamophobia or Islamophobia makes a lot of money these days. And so, one of the reasons why he gets a lot of clicks, a lot of likes, there's a network out there that funds Islamophobia, so it's more convenient to go after Islam and Muslims if you're getting a very good cash flow from those particular organisations. If you don't believe me, because apparently, Muslims do taqiyya, right? So this apostate prophet goes out and says, well, Muslims are trained not to trust disbelievers, but then he goes around and says, oh, Muslims themselves are taught taqiyya, that they are allowed to lie to non-Muslims. And apparently everything that I'm saying in this video apparently is a lie. So I can't even be trusted. Why? It's part of convenience. It's part of convenience. Because my arguments are refuting the critics, we'll just say he's lying for Islam. It's another great way of, it's convenience for them to say, he's just lying, let's just disregard everything that he says. But of course, when his own parents tells him that Jews and Christians look like pigs and monkeys, apparently that's not a lie. No, that part of it is legitimate, folks. Okay? That's not taqiyya there. When it's convenient, it's not taqiyya. He goes on and says, oh, look, Islam preaches hate. It tells you why Christians are immoral. Well, Israel Folau was just in the news the other day. He's a Christian. He criticised atheists and homosexuals and said they will burn in hell. Did apostate prophet go after his Christian brethren and say Israel Folau is preaching hate and intolerance while he's preaching the hatred of homosexuals and drunkards and atheists and condemning them to hell? Where is the love there? Where is the respect? Where is the tolerance? How come Israel Folau doesn't get his free speech? You may say, oh, well, he did get his free speech. But why is he being criticised this way? Why is he being suppressed? Why is sponsorship deals trying to close down his organisation, trying to take sponsorship deals away from him, like through Qantas? If it's just about tolerance, if it's about respecting one another's views and beliefs, then why is Israel Folau being punished like this? By the very same West that Mr. Apostate Prophet appeals to, that where we have apparently free speech, liberation, we tolerate each other's views, even if we disagree with them, but we don't see people like Apostate Prophet going after the secular West or the atheist West or the Westerners, or going after Qantas for removing his sponsorship deals, for sticking up for Israel Folau. So why doesn't he do that? Why doesn't he at the same time condemn Israel Folau? Is that because he's a Christian and he doesn't want to go after his Christian brethren? But notice, folks, We'll go after Islam, we'll go after Muslims, because that's the conveniency for my organization.
Why atheists can't be tolerated, and why apostates are considered evil. They will prove my point, but they won't call it hate. They will just rationalize it.
Well, apostates are considered evil, their actions are considered evil because they do sins and transgressions. There is absolutely nothing hatred or wrong about that. And if it is hate, we're hating the sin. And that's what Christians say to us. Christians say, Muslims, we don't hate you. We just hate the sin that you're doing. So why is it any different? And if a Christian turns around and says, we just hate the sin, we don't really hate the person, well, why do Christians actually condemn not just the sin, but the person also to hell? So it's interesting because they're going around and saying, look, Islam preaches hate. Islam preaches hate of infidels. Yet this person, apostate prophet, I believe he's a Christian. Well, I'm not sure 100%. He could be an atheist. If he is a Christian, he believes in the crucifixion of Jesus, and whoever doesn't accept Jesus is condemned to hell. They go to hell. Isn't that a form of preaching of hate? I mean, you can't turn around and say, we love Muslims. Yeah, we love Muslims, but if they don't accept Christianity, Jesus is going to torture you in hell. Is that love, really? Well, that's some kind of artificial love. I mean, can you imagine telling your friend, I love you, man, give me a hug, but I'm going to throw you in hell if you disbelieve in my Christianity? Doesn't make sense. Can you imagine Jesus came up to you and said that? Jesus came up to you and said, I love you, man. You're my brother. You can be an atheist, you can be a Muslim, that's fine. But you know what? I love you. But if you die, I'm going to throw you in hell. Now, that's pretty cunning love there.
A religious Muslim who also strictly practices and studies Islam knows exactly what I'm talking about and can find this hate that I'm talking about in their lives and in their teachings and learnings of Islam. They will believe that the Jews are the main enemies in the end times, that Muslims will fight and kill the Jews in the end times, that the Jews...
Okay, let me correct him here. It is not just the Muslims who actually believe that there will be a war between Muslims and Jews. And these Jews aren't all Jews. There are Jews in Israel that are good Jews, the Orthodox Jews, and these people actually hate the state of Israel. They get oppressed by the state of Israel. They actually protest against the illegitimate state of Israel, the Zionists. You can see them, and I'll put a hyperlink below this video as my third hyperlink, and you can see for yourself. And these Jews actually stand with Muslims against the illegal state of Israel. And yes, there will be wars between Muslims and Jews, but that's just not excluded to Islam. Your Bible actually says that there will be a war against the Jews. Open up your chapter to Luke 19:27. Go through the commentary and see that Jesus will come back and slaughter those who rejected him, who didn't accept him. And he will come back with vengeance against the Jews. This is in John Gill's commentary. You can read several commentaries on this verse, and there will be a war against the Jews, the same people who persecuted and killed Jesus according to your own theology. In fact, his own scripture says Jesus will come back with a sword. In his own Bible, in the book Matthew, Jesus said, I did not come to bring peace, but I came to bring a sword. So Jesus was talking about bringing the sword, bringing the judgment. Who against? The infidels, the non-Muslims, right? He was talking about the Jews. He was talking about the Muslims, that he's going to bring judgment against them for not accepting Jesus. So when he talks about hatred, Islam preaches hatred. So what does Jesus teach? Love and peace? Then why is there hellfire? Why is there judgment? Doesn't make any sense, does it?
Will follow the Dajjal, the Islamic Antichrist. That Christians and Jews can't be taken as close friends. That Christians and Jews can never be reliable allies and friends.
You know, it's interesting because he says, the Quran says, yes, it does rightfully say it, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The Quran does say, do not take Jews and Christians as your close friends. I mean, of course, you can respect them, you can see them in the street, you can say hello to them, you can greet them, there's no issue. You can keep Facebook friends, which are Jews and Christians, no problem. But what we're talking about is close companions. You sit down, you talk with them every day, and you eat dinner with them every day. And, you know, you meet on a regular daily basis, and they're basically like your companions. And of course, Islam says you can't do that. However, on the purpose of giving them dawah, religious, dawah, propagation, can you go to a house of a Jew and Christian and eat with them? Of course you can. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ actually did that. But to be their close companion, Islam says no. But is that something really bad? No, because that's what your Christian doctrine teaches. Your Christian doctrine teaches, and again, I'll put a hyperlink verse below this video because I don't want to make this a long video than it is, because I'm going to go through a 10-minute video trying to rebut everything. Obviously, it's going to be a longer video because it's bringing up many points. So my video's obviously naturally going to take longer. And if I start quoting, going through all these verses, it's going to take even longer. So what I'll do is I'll put a hyperlink below this video, and you can see the verses yourself, where the Bible itself teaches that if a person does not preach this gospel, do not invite him to your house. So in Islam, we actually are allowed to invite Christians and Jews to our house, where we can, serve them dinner, and propagate Islam to them. No problem. We can sit together on that basis. But here we have Christianity, where if I don't hold the Bible in my hand, I'm forbidden to enter the home of a Christian. But why doesn't he quote those verses? But you see, the reason why he doesn't quote those verses is because Christians themselves have really apostated from the Bible. If they really truly believed in their Bible and fulfilled those conditions, they would act that way. They wouldn't invite any Muslims to their houses. And by the way, folks, these non-Muslims, these critics, you think they even want Muslim friends themselves? It's interesting because they always turn around and say, well, how come Islam doesn't allow us to be your friends? But if I ask the apostate prophet, how many Muslim friends do you have? No, and I'm not talking about the secular, modernist, liberalistic Muslims that don't practice their religion. I'm talking about conservative or fundamentalist, people on Sunnah. Why don't you befriend them? Why is that? Are you sure you don't have anything? I mean, this person says he's an ex-Muslim. I bet he doesn't even keep in touch with his relatives who are Muslim. And so you need to be aware that people like the apostate prophet, these people feed into hatred themselves. You know how they turn around and say, Islam and Muslims preach hatred? These are the people who actually inspire people like Brenton, Tarrant to walk into a mosque and shoot 40 or 50 Muslims actually died in that massacre. Now, did that happen overnight? No. He was preached hatred day in and day night. Yes, hatred of Muslims. Brenton Tarrant would say that he was inspired by people like Blair Cottrell, who's a right-wing Australian activist who would preach constant hatred against Muslims, alienation of Muslims, that Muslims are thugs, that Muslims are criminals, that Muslims are this, that Muslims are pedophiles, Muslims are all part of grooming gangs, Muslims lie, Muslims do taqiyya, Muslims want to take over your countries, constantly hating on Muslims, hating, and the guy boiled up, went and picked up a gun and said, I'm going to go and shoot 50 Muslim worshippers. So how come the apostate prophet doesn't speak about that type of indoctrination in West? And folks, this is just not an isolated case. I'll put another hyperlink below this video, and you can see for yourself that when Brenton Tarrant actually committed the atrocity that he did, I took a screenshot of many non-Muslims living on Australia praising what Brenton Tarrant did. You know how you guys like to say, oh, when September 11 happened, all these Arab countries were celebrating? You know what? We have that captured on screen showing that the Australian citizens, not all of them, but a big portion of them were celebrating. We've captured that on screenshot. And so this isn't just an isolated case. This isn't just a lone wolf. This man has got real supporters in Australia, Europe, America, whatever. But of course, apostate prophet won't comment on that, of course, because he feeds into the hatred. He wants non-Muslims to kill Muslims. You know how they like to say, oh, we like to preach in peaceful terms. We like to, show our tolerance. We don't want to spread violence against Muslims. But this is what he's doing. If a person who's a white supremacist listens to apostate prophets speak, he will think that Muslims are the enemy, Muslims can't be trusted, that Muslims are the liars, that Muslims hate everything about the West, and Muslims are not human beings. So he dehumanizes Muslims. So when people like Brenton Tarrant go out and kill Muslims, he's justified because he's inspired by the hatred of these people. But of course, apostate prophet will conveniently say, I'm not a hate preacher, while he preaches misinterpretations of Islamic doctrine in order to show that Islam hates everything that the West stands upon. But he refuses to comment on why Jesus sends infidels to hellfire, refuses to comment on how white supremacists like Brenton Tarrant get radicalized and what type of hate preaching was he exposed to, and he refuses to comment on how Jews have been intoxicated by this toxic propaganda in order to dehumanize the Arabs and go out and massacre and kill them and preach the total annihilation of that race. And you'll see the hyperlink below this video how they speak about the Palestinian people. But of course, he won't comment on that.
An apostate needs to be shut down, if not punished, directly under an Islamic state, preferably by death. I'm not here to vilify a person who believes in Islam. I'm not saying all of them.
You can have a look at my video. Again, I'll put another hyperlink below this video about apostates being killed. You'll see my video how, I expose the West, how I show that governed apostates actually get killed even in the West. And I show a clear similarity between the two. So I will not let him get away with that. So watch my video. Again, I'll put a hyperlink below this video. Do apostates in Islam get killed? And what is the comparison between that and how Westerners actually also kill certain people for treason and apostasy, government apostasy? And you can have a look and judge for yourself. And it's interesting because even in the news as we speak, we're seeing Julian Assange, he's being extradited back to, to America and so forth because he's trying to expose the government and its policies and some of the things that they do undercover. His freedom of speech is being oppressed and it's not being tolerated. They want to imprison him, castrate him and so forth. And so, why aren't we seeing these ex-Muslims going out publicly and shaming these sorts of organizations for oppressing this type of person? I'm pretty sure if Julian Assange from WikiLeaks, if he went into Saudi Arabian intelligence agencies or Saudi Arabian government, or whether they went through to North Korea and exposed some of their government files, I think Julian Assange would be like the Western poster child for democracy, secularism and liberalism. But, of course, if he goes against his West and exposes the West, and suddenly your freedom of speech and tolerance goes out the window.
Are completely hateful people, and you can't trust any of them. I'm here to point out the problem with Islam and how it affects and directs someone who believes in it into believing that the other is bad. When I was a religious Muslim,
The other is bad. You believe as a Christian that the other is bad. You believe as an atheist that the religious people are bad. You believe, this is your belief. Why the double standards? You don't believe Muslims are good. You don't believe Muslims should exist in the West. They should be deported. So why the double standards? You don't believe that Muslim immigration should happen in Europe, in Germany, in Poland, in England. If you loved them so much, why don't you allow them to stay with you? Why do we only see bad preaching come from you? Why do you accuse Muslims of bad preaching while it is you who bad preaches Muslims and Islam and the person, the individual himself?
I was in this dilemma between hating them as I was expected to and loving them as I learned to love them while growing up with them and having only happiness with them. But I had hate. I'm not talking about active hate, wanting to go out and punish those people and kill those people. What I'm saying is hate inside or in the back of your mind for Allah.
Okay, that's pretty interesting because apparently, if Islam was a terrorist religion, you'd actually teach your child to go and kill an infidel, right? But it's interesting because he actually admitted himself that his parents didn't teach him to go out and hurt a non-Muslim. Now, I find that quite ironic.
People. What I'm saying is hate inside or in the back of your mind for Allah, for Islam. So I could be friendly to someone, but in the back of my mind, if it came to really facing what I should feel about this person, I would find the hate that the Islamic religion taught me, that it teaches pretty much everyone. When I left Islam, I came back to being me again, and to just judging people based on what they do.
No, he didn't leave Islam. He actually left his parents' indoctrination. Remember what he said? He said, it was my parents. I grew up. My parents were telling me this. Then he obviously tried to shift it to what his imam said. But very rarely we heard him say, I read the Quran for myself growing up, and it was the Quran that was teaching me this. Because, let's be frank, folks, if you picked up the Quran, once you've read the whole thing, you're not going to close the book and say, okay, I hate an infidel now. I hate a non-Muslim. I hate them so much. I just hate the Christians and Jews. I'm just going to sit down and cry to tears. No, you're not going to do that. That's not the effect you're going to get, right? Anyone could do it. Just do it. Do an examination for yourself. Go, pick up the Quran, read it from back to front, and I can assure you, you're not going to get that impression at the end. But you see, I think that this person, usually he's from a Turkish family, right? A lot of, I'm not saying all of them, but a great portion of Turkish parents are ignorant, and they'll say, Yahudiler kötü, Yahudiler yalancı. In Turkish, it means, the Yahuds, the Jews are bad, the Jews are evil, or they're bad people, and so forth. But, or Yahudiler yalancı, which means they're liars. Jews are liars. And so, obviously, he hasn't been brought up on the correct methodology. See, I personally wouldn't teach my child those things. He's obviously come from a very ignorant or perceivably extreme family that doesn't have strong connections and communications with their children, and so this has unfortunately affected him growing up. And so he's been exposed to the wrong type of preaching. And so I have got kids myself, and I personally wouldn't teach them those things. I'll wait for them to grow up and so they can read the Quran for themselves. And I'll teach them the pure message of Islam. And so I think that unfortunately, him growing up, he was polluted from a very young age. And now he just uses it as an excuse to have a go at mainstream Islam in order to break the connection between Jews and Christians and Muslims and cause more friction than it is. But it's interesting because you'll never see him quote, like Islamophobes or ex-Muslims, you won't see them quote, the peaceful messages in Islam regarding the Jews and the Christians. There are certain verses in the Quran where it actually says that the Christians are nearest in love to the Muslims. So why doesn't he actually quote that particular verse? And the verse continues to say things like that they are nearest to the Muslims because among them there are monks and preachers who are not proud. And so although Islam may preach that, the Christians are on idolatry or the Jews are committing sins and they're evil and what they're doing is evil and so forth, at the same time it speaks highly about certain aspects and figures amongst their Christian personalities. But of course the Islamophobe or the ex-Muslim or the atheist critic of Islam, these people won't quote those particular verses. Why? Well, you're going to have to ask them about that. And so here is a verse. It's in Surah Al-Maidah 582. It says, "Verily you'll find the strongest among men in enmity to the believers, Muslims who are the Jews." They're the strongest enmity towards the Muslims. And we see that in Israel and Palestine. And those who are mushrikun. And you'll find the nearest in love to the believers, those who say, "We are Christians." So the nearest in love to the Muslims are those who say they are Christians. Why isn't that quoted by this person? How come his parents never told him about this verse? Well, although the Quran may speak, obviously, like I said, how Jews and Christians may be sin in polytheism and so forth, the Quran actually also speaks highly about dealing justly and kindly with those individuals. In Quran, you can see Quran 60:80, it says, "Allah forbids you not with regard to those who you fight, you not for your faith, nor drive you out of your homes, from dealing kindly and justly with them. For Allah loves those who are just." So Allah in this verse, in Surah 60, verse 8, He's referencing to deal justly with those Jews and the Christians, the non-Muslims. Again, in another verse of the Quran, in Surah 49:13, it says, "O mankind, we created you from a single pair, male and female, and made you into nations and tribes, that you may know each other, that you may despise each other. Verily the most honored of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you, and Allah has full knowledge and is well acquainted." So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clearly describing that we should not despise one another. So although the Quran may describe them as being in foolishness, as being in sin, in being in transgression, in being in misguidance, it also teaches Muslims to respect them in terms of humanity. In fact, Islam permits Muslim men to marry chaste women from among the Jews and the Christians. The Muslim man is obliged to treat his Jewish or Christian wife with mercy, love and compassion, which is more intimate than marital relationships or friendships. Does it make sense that a Muslim will be permitted to marry a non-Muslim but not befriend one? It is ludicrous to say that the Prophet of Islam or the Quran is anti-Semitic because the Prophet himself was Semitic. How could the Quran be considered anti-Semitic when the name of Moses is mentioned many more times than the name of Prophet Muhammad? The Quran describes the original Torah revealed to Moses as giving light and guidance and demands the respecting of rights of all people, including Jews. It is incumbent on Muslims to believe in the original revelation sent to Prophet Moses, Jesus. The criticism is the Quran is aimed at distortions and sinful acts of Jews, Christians, as well as some Muslims. It is true that in parts of the Muslim world, one can find anti-Semitic views. These have nothing to do with the Quran and are distortion of the Quranic principles. Political problems often take religious hoe, and like every community, fanatics exist among Muslims too. Through the better part of history of Islamic civilization, Muslims understand that their faith required that they treat people of all religions with respect. Christians and Jews lived in peace and security with the Ottoman Empire. In Muslim Spain, Muslims and Jews cooperated in creating a glorious civilization whose light shone over Europe during the Middle Ages. None of this would have been possible if the Quran, fountain-headed of Islamic teachings, preached hostility towards people of other faiths. In fact, some of the early Islamic empires we see, they actually saved 150,000 Jews, and they were told to be imported into Turkey because against the Spanish Inquisition. So, and of course, and I'll put a hyperlink below this video and you can see for yourself, the Ottoman Empire, the Muslim Empire, for example, they sent aid ships into Ireland. Can you imagine? Ireland was going through persecution. They were going through starvation. They were going through poverty. And an aid ship, a Muslim aid ship from a Khilafah, it took aid, food aid into Ireland, and this is all over historical records, sending them food aid. And the Irish community today even thank the Muslims, even till this day, for that gratitude. And so, of course, the apostate prophet would not mention these things in history. In fact, you know what I'll do? I'll put another hyperlink below this video. I'll show you all of the good things that Muslims actually do for non-Muslims. There's a whole list of them. From charity organizations to feeding the poor to protecting them against terrorism, holding hands with them, protecting their churches from getting bombed by Al-Shabaab militants, or whether it's militants in Egypt, Muslim women giving their hijabs to Christian women so they can look like Muslims, so they don't get killed by other extremist groups. These are all documented, and I'll put a hyperlink below this video. Of course, the apostate prophet, he would not mention these things.
And I see so many ex-Muslims, former Muslims, go through the same thing. I would love to see many more Muslims make the same step and end up in a state where they don't hate the...
It's interesting, he says he's seen ex-Muslims go through persecution from their own parents and hatred and so forth. But, I've heard so many stories where even women who are atheists or Christian, who actually live in Christian families or atheist families, and they actually practice Islam, they convert Islam, and they do it in secrecy in their own room because they're scared that their parents are going to find out and they're going to lose out of the inheritance, and they get kicked out of their homes, there was even a study conducted here in Australia where this study showed, and they analysed and investigated to find out whether parents of non-Muslims, if these parents would accept their children to get married with Muslims. And because I showed you where in Islam a Muslim can actually get married to a Christian and a Jew. Well, there was a study conducted in Australia, and I'll put the study below this video as another hyperlink. And in this study, it shows that non-Muslims are afraid to give their children in marriage to Muslims. Now, 60% of them feared this out of 100. 60% did not want to give it. Now, you may turn around and say, well, Muslims share the same view. Muslims don't really want their children to marry non-Muslims. Well, you know what? 60% of your folks don't want it either. So we want to turn around and say it's the Muslims who are preaching the hatred, it's the Muslims who are preaching, but the studies are showing that it's the non-Muslims who are actually preaching, majority of them, 60% out of 100, preaching that they don't want their children to associate in marriage with Muslims. So if there's indoctrination and bigotry and brainwashing from the Muslim side, well, what about the non-Muslim side?
Other anymore. In a state where they are not preoccupied with prejudice, established and fueled by the religion that they have been following forever, that teaches them from childhood into adulthood to judge and to hate, and to distance and to unfriend. Same thing. I would love to see many more Muslims make the same step and end up in a state where they don't hate the other anymore. In a state where they are not preoccupied with prejudice, established and fueled by the religion that they have been following forever.
But that doesn't make sense. If you're saying that you want to see Muslims to take a step forward and see that they don't preach hatred anymore, well, that doesn't make sense, because you're telling us that these parents are inspired by Islam and by their Quran. So the only way they're not going to preach or brainwash their children to hate infidels or non-Muslim is if they actually become non-Muslims themselves. So it doesn't make sense if you're telling them that you shouldn't see them preach this anymore if you actually believe that all of this inspiration comes from the Quran. But we know that all of this inspiration doesn't come from the Quran, because he said that in the beginning of his video that he views the Christians as pigs. His parents taught him, don't forget this, go back to the start of this video, you'll see where he says that his parents taught him that Christians are viewed as pigs. And when he goes out into the street to see a Christian, he sees them pig-headed. Well, that's not even in the Quran. That's not even in the Hadith. So I think what he needs to do is he needs to tell Muslim parents not to hate from their own ignorant interpretation, because that's not what the Quran teaches. The Hadith doesn't say that Christians are pig-headed people. Okay, so let's see. We'll go back to the video and you can see for yourself where he actually says that Christians were seen as pigs. Let's have a look.
Dark room around me tell me things like Christians are immoral idolaters and they look like pigs. And then I went out and saw...
Well, there is no verse in the Quran that calls Christians pigs. None. In fact, I challenge any non-Muslim to produce it in the verse, in the comment section. You won't find it. But Jews specifically are called pigs. When the Quran actually speaks about the people of book, how they were transformed into, pigs and monkeys, apes and pigs or whatever, swine, this was in reference to particular group of people who are disobedient to Allah, and Allah transformed them into pigs and monkeys, swine. You know, some of the tafsir and mufassirin, some of the commentators of the Quran and Islam, they've obviously declared that they were the Jews and the Christians. But that doesn't mean the Jews of the Christians of today. The Jews and the Christians of today haven't been transformed into pigs and monkeys. This was when it was revealed. Allah was speaking about some of the Jews and the Christians of the time, and some of those who actually were disobedient, they were transformed into pigs and monkeys. So again, I challenge any non-Muslim to actually produce a single verse in the Quran where it says that the Jews and Christians of today are the actual pigs and monkeys. There is no verse like that. And that reference in the Quran refers to a specific group of people that were transformed into pigs and monkeys, and for their disobedience to Allah. And so when he wants to say that his parents taught him to view a Christian as a pig in the street, well, number one, his parents are either ignorant of Islam. Number two, he's being deceptive of the Quran himself, intentionally misinterpreting the scripture. And he calls himself an ex-Muslim, someone who apparently knows Islam better than all you lot.
Quran chapter 2 verse 120. And never will the Jews or the Christians approve of you until you follow their religion. Say, indeed, the guidance of Allah is the only guidance. If you were to follow their desires after what has come to you of knowledge, you would have against Allah no protector or helper. The message that neither Jews nor Christians will like you if you don't follow their religion was something I learned very early. It makes you so much focused on the difference between you and them and prevents true acceptance. I had this in my mind forever in my life. Chapter 8 verse 73.
But that doesn't make sense, because you're saying that this verse proves that if it doesn't prove true acceptance. But that's hypocritical, because that's what you believe. You believe that Muslims and Islam need to be reformed. That in order for Muslims to be liked by the West, we need to give up our religion. We need to give up Sharia law. We need to give up our system and our values in order to be liked by the kuffar, by the non-Muslims. So why is there this double standards? How many times have you heard where a Westerner will say, well, if you want to practice your Islam and your values and your culture, don't do it here in the West, pack up your bags and go back to the Middle East. So why the double standards? Why do you accuse Islam and Muslims for showing you a verse in the Quran which says, and never will the Jews and the Christians approve of you? Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. You don't approve of the Muslim ethics, their culture, their values. You don't accept that. And then you hypocritically blame the Quran for displaying what you actually truly are built upon. You're built upon this very true narration. The Quran actually speaks truth about your own people, about your West, how you actually view Muslims. To you, an acceptable Muslim is an apostate Muslim, is an ex-Muslim, is a liberal Muslim, is a Muslim who only accepts Western ideology over Islam. He says it makes it so much focus between the difference between you and them. But your secular, your Western ideology, that's what its whole focus is built upon. It's built upon liberal secularism versus them. Who are they? It's Islam. We need to stop Islam. We need to stop Sharia law. We need to stop their culture. We need to stop inviting them to the West. So how come you don't go after the Western ideology that preaches us versus them versus us?
Acceptance. I had this in my mind forever in my life. Chapter 8 verse 73.
How did he have this all in his life when he still has that in his life? He believes that. His Western ideology believes that. So when he turns around and says, I'm glad, I'm liberated, I'm now an ex-Muslim, I've now come out of Islam because Islam preached it's us versus them, but then he adopts secularism and Westernism and Christianity, and in the Christianity that he believes in is Westernism, and Westernism, his secularism, teaches that we should not accept them. We should not accept their culture. We should put an end to it. And that's why he spends all day and all night trying to speak bad about Islam, the Muslims, discredit the Quran in order that it is not accepted in the West. So why is he hypocritically talking about us versus them versus us, when he's trying to alienate 1.6 billion Muslims and cause friction and disunity so that the Muslims do not bring our religion to the West.
And those who disbelieved are allies of one another. This doesn't merely refer to a historic event. It says exactly what it says, and is often the basis for a saying, a very popular one among religious Muslims, which goes, Muslims are one nation, and disbelief is one nation, or the nation of disbelief is one. A pretty horrible delusion and distortion.
How is that even a horrible delusion when 500 Yazidi women were trapped on a mountain? They were non-Muslims. The American government completely kept a blind eye against the atrocities the Assad regime did against the poor Syrian people, shooting them, mass murder, killing them, raining bombs and poison upon them. America didn't even flinch an eye. When 500 Yazidi women were trapped on a mountain, Michelle Obama put one hashtag, save the girls. The very next day, the Americans were there rescuing these women. So what the Quran actually says is actually a reflection of what the actual West do. So it's true that the disbelievers are allies of one another, and that is a fact. And you can even see that globally, that the disbelievers are usually allies with one another. And those who uphold conservative Islam are usually the ones who are alienated, who are usually alone in this warfare. I mean, has Australia ever taken Pakistan as an ally? Has Australia taken Indonesia as an ally? No, Australia usually takes Israel, Great Britain, and America as their allies. And when you usually see ally forming between, say, some Middle Eastern nations, whether it's Russia and the Iranian government, or it could be Syria, for example, Syrian government, you usually see them in bed basically with liberalistic Muslims, liberalistic powers or powers that are against Sunnism. And so we quite often see that. And I think it's, when people say, well, America pretty much stands up for Saudi Arabia and they're pretty much allies, and, you have Turkey and the United Nations and so forth. They're not really allies. That's just basically, it's artificial. When it comes to crunch, certainly the disbelievers are with the disbelievers. And we see that throughout history and even in our present time. But what he actually forgot to quote, and I'll put a hyperlink below this video, is the dhimmis that in an Islamic country, in an Islamic state, that there are the protection of dhimmis, that if they pay the jizya, you're actually supposed to protect the non-Muslims who are under your control. And so you can actually ally with your non-Muslim citizens, as Umar ibn Khattab did. And I'll put a hyperlink below this video. You can see the article is written by Bassam Zawadi, and he goes through a whole list of showing the protection of non-Muslims living under a Muslim state. And you can see that there are protections that you can actually ally yourself with non-Muslim citizens in order to protect their safeguarding from an enemy country that is trying to invade that land. We've already addressed the point about do not take them as friends, so we're just going to skip past that point. There is one point that I wanted to say. He mentioned do not take the Jews and the Christians as friends, and then he said, this is so much about diversity. But the verse actually says do not take them as close patrons or companions. And so you can still live in a community of diversity even though you don't view them as your close friends. For example, you may live in Australia. That community may have approximately, let's say 10 million, let's say 5 million people, okay, in Melbourne, Australia, for example. Okay, not every single one of those people are your friends. Yeah, you out of all of them, you may have, let's say you may have 100 friends. Okay, so do you still fit in within society? I mean, only 100 of them are your friends. The people that you talk to, you meet, you help, say hello, you sit with a coffee. I mean, 100 is a lot. Pretty much an average of, let's say, to be fair, you probably got about 30 friends, yeah, that you're pretty intimate with. I mean, you're pretty extremely intimate with only about 5 of them, let's be fair, okay? So this is what Islam says. So does that mean that you're not, you don't fit into society? You're not part of diversity because you're not befriending all 5 million people in Melbourne, Australia? No, that would be ludicrous. So this is what Islam and the Quran instructs. That yes, you can keep the Muslims as your friends, but you can still live in a diversity among non-Muslims. Because if the Quran did not preach diversity, then why does Sharia law itself permit dhimmis to live amongst Muslims? Why does Islam permit non-Muslims to give the jizya and live alongside Muslims if it wasn't part of diversity? He will tell you that yes, Christians and Jews can live along Muslims if they pay the jizya. Under an Islamic state we're talking about. So how does that even speak contradictory to diversity? He can't answer that. I'm going to quickly go through this. Again, he spoke about Quran 98:6. He says, indeed, those who disbelieved among the people of the scripture and the polytheists will be in the fire of hell, abiding eternally therein. He says this is hate scripture, but his own Christianity preaches that non-believers, meaning Muslims and atheists, they'll go to hell. Right? So if Islam is preaching hatred because it's condemning those people to hell, what about your own Christianity? And it's interesting because atheists themselves don't believe in hell. So again, if Islam is preaching this sort of hatred, then the atheist shouldn't be offended because apparently according to the atheist, it's a mythical place. And yes, Allah calls them the worst of the creatures. The Jews and the Christians or the polytheists, those who go to hell. Yes, they're the worst of creatures because in the sight of Allah, they've actually worshipped another God besides Allah. So of course, in front of his eyes, they're the worst of creatures because of the sins that they do. And so how is that any different than Christianity condemning me to hell? If Christianity is condemning me to hell because I'm a Muslim, then according to the Christian faith, then I am worse than a Christian who believes in Jesus, who believes that Jesus died for his sins, and that Christian gets salvation. If I am just equal as another Christian, then why am I given heaven? It shows that even the Christian faith believes that I am the worst creature according to the Christian faith. Otherwise, if I was on equal footings with a Christian, I'd be in the very same place as a Christian. In the afterlife. Now, wouldn't I? Does it make sense? That I'm not. Yet, apparently, it's only Islam that preaches they are the worst of creatures. They are condemned to hell. I mean, he should just apostate from his own Christianity if that's what he's teaching. And when it comes to atheists, atheists believe we're the most primitive people. I've said this in the start of my video, that I am the worst of creatures. As a Muslim, I think primitively. Everything that I've said in this video is primitive, it's backwards, it's nonsensical. I'm dehumanized because I need to get with the times. I'm the worst creature according to Westerners because I need to evolve and become modern and think like I should think in the 21st century, right? I shouldn't be a Neanderthal. I shouldn't be this primitive creature, right? So why are they attacking the Quran when it's only a reflection of their own society, of how they actually view Muslims and Islam?
Basically, everyone who disbelieves is the worst of creatures. And this is what Allah supposedly directly says. All this is just dark and sad. See, you can never hear religious Muslims say Christians are great people or Jews are fantastic people. That's not because you can't generalize. You can very often hear generalizing negative words about different religious groups. It's because saying something good about these religious groups would be contrary to what the Almighty Allah says. Islam
Okay, so I posted a verse. He says it is contrary to what Islam says to speak good of them. But I showed you a verse, a clear verse in the Quran that says that the nearest in love to the Muslims are those who are Christians. And he turns around and says this is contradictory to Islam. It is contradictory to Islam that Islam would ever speak good about the Jews or the Christians. But I've shown you a verse where it clearly says that nearest in love to the Muslims are those who call themselves Christians. And so this person doesn't know the Quran. If he did, then he wouldn't say those things. It's clear he's ignorant of the Quran himself. Now look at this contradiction he puts out, right? He understands how stupid his arguments are sounding, yeah? Because he's here trying to say Islam preaches hate, 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 and here he's actually trying to preach the hatred of Muslims. He's saying this is why Muslims can't speak anything good about Jews or Christians, yeah? Let's see his dilemma here.
Words about different religious groups. It's because saying something good about these religious groups would be contrary to what the Almighty Allah says. Islam teaches a lot of hate and carries a lot of tribalistic generalizations that are simply unhealthy. I'm not here to say everyone should hate Muslims for this. That wouldn't make me very different from what I'm protesting here, although I don't want to tell people what to think or to feel. I'm saying that Islam teaches hate, and that hate is manifest in the Muslim community, especially if you grow up a Muslim, or if you are a Muslim and join the Muslim community and join talks of different religious groups. Islam is such a waste.
You are an absolute yourself, and you contradicted yourself. You said that you don't preach hate. You don't preach, negativity or, darkness or whatever. And you're saying, well, you're just trying to expose what Islam teaches its followers. Well, I've shown you in this video that you've actually singled out Muslims when I've shown that the Christians or the Jews have a lot to answer for with their preaching of hatred. The Islamophobes in the comments have a lot to answer for when they're preaching anti-immigration and their hatred for Muslims in general. You have a lot to answer for, my friends. When you're contradicting yourself, when you're misquoting the Quran and saying, nowhere in the Quran it says good things about Christians, when I've shown you in this video a particular verse that speaks good about Christians. So you have lied against the Quran to show only the negative stuff, but you haven't shown the positive stuff where it actually preaches love about certain Christians. But you concealed that from your audience, and then you had the audacity to say that you are not really showing hatred yourself, that you're only exposing the hatred in the Quran. You are a very, very cunning and deceptive person. Did you think that you weren't going to get checked?
Teaches a lot of hate and carries a lot of tribalistic generalizations that are simply unhealthy. I'm not here to say everyone should hate Muslims for this. That wouldn't make me very different from what I'm protesting here, although I don't want to tell people what to think or to feel. I'm saying that Islam teaches hate, and that hate is manifest in the Muslim community, especially if you grow up a Muslim, or if you are a Muslim and join the Muslim community and join talks of different religious groups. Islam is such a waste of a potentially good and loving human nature. I don't hate Muslims. I don't dislike them, especially not remotely as much as I disliked other religious groups when I was only a 9-year-old boy. I'm done with hate. That's over. And it ended with Islam, the source of such hate. I simply want to help.
The source of hate? Let me show you a particular hadith. This is a hadith. It says, the rights of a neighbour are that, this is concerning the non-Muslims, the Christians, atheists, it could be Jews, could even be Muslims. The rights of a neighbour are that if he falls sick, you visit him. If he dies, you follow his funeral procession. If he asks you for a loan, you lend it to him. If he is in need, you assist him. If good befalls him, you congratulate him. If misfortune befalls him, you consolidate him. That you not build your houses above his house, blocking out the breeze, and that you not afflict him with aroma of your cooking pot without offering him some. Look at this amazing verse. This is the treatment of what you're supposed to do with your neighbour, regardless if he's a Muslim, a Jew, a Christian, an atheist. That you should not go to sleep without asking whether your neighbour has food to eat. That you don't build your houses above his